This presentation is going to be in two parts. The first part is really going to focus on the key findings from this work. And then the second part is going to be best practices for engagement, how we were able to obtain some of those findings. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Priya for our next slide.
Thanks, Caroline. We wanted to do and start off with a land acknowledgement. So the USC Price Center for Social Innovation at USC acknowledges the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples as the traditional land caretakers of the Los Angeles Basin and the South Channel Islands. And we acknowledge our presence on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Chumash, Kizh, and Tataviam nations. We recognize and are committed to lifting up their stories, culture, and community. We pay our respects to the ancestors, elders, and our relatives, past, present, and emerging. And if you're interested, I encourage you to click the link below, nativeland.ca, to discover what native lands you might be on.
Thank you, Priya. That was beautiful. So let me introduce our team. I'm Caroline Bala. I'm the Executive Director of the Price Center for Social Innovation here at USC. I'm joined by Priya, who you just heard from, and Liz. You guys want to unmute and say hi?
Hi.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as Caroline mentioned, I'm a research assistant at the Price Center. I'm also a Master of Public Administration student at USC.
And I'm a research assistant and a Master of Public Policy student at USC.
They're amazing. They're going to be leading us through some of our activities. This work, a core team member is who we call him JR, John Roberson. He's the Chief of Staff at LeadersUp. They're a national nonprofit committing to bridging the divide to create an inclusive anti-racist economy, and we worked with them for many years. And then our director of the Price Center for Social Innovation is Gary Painter. So we are all the team. And then I'm also joined on this. I see one of my colleagues, Dr. Meg Goulding. She is also a part of our team. So she's doing a WAF 10 project. So that's who you're talking to today, or who you're hearing from. Next slide. So what was the WAF 8.0 project? So what we really wanted to do and what we have done, so we have received 4 WAF awards. And what we do in most of them is actually work with employers. So we really try to get the employer perspective on many different issues. And in this case, we wanted to talk to employers about how they understood barriers and opportunities for supporting precariously housed employees. So what sorts of opportunities are there to help folks who work for you who are precariously housed? And then also work with employers to create solutions to understand how to help hire and retain precariously housed folks. And this work builds off of work that we had done previously with the Los Angeles Business Council, which looked at the 3 fastest growing industries in Los Angeles and saw what do employers do to help retain or to help folks with hiring challenges or with housing challenges. And the answer is very little, right? So we found through this work, and we'll talk more about this, we found through this work that employers don't know how to do a lot for folks who are precariously housed. So yes, I agree. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, raise your hand, unmute. Like, I want this to be interactive and I don't want to just talk at you for the next 20 minutes. So please feel free to ask any questions. All right, next slide. So one of the things that we found, and again, there's briefs. I know Amanda put it in the chat. We did a survey, and we'll talk more about that survey in the second part of the presentation. But we asked employers, what did your company provide to employees? What sorts of supports did they provide? And what did they provide prior to the pandemic and then during the pandemic? And we launched this project in early 2021. So we were really deep in the pandemic still. Many folks who had the ability to were still working from home. And so we found that employers provided a range of services, and we were very surprised to see that nearly 50% of our respondents did include housing related assistance. And you can sort of view that folks were able to provide more supports prior to the pandemic in some areas. But then during the pandemic, things like counseling and flexible work hours increased. Next slide. We also found that most companies, 2 out of 3 agreed that employing individuals with individuals experiencing housing fit within their company's mission and values. So that speaks a little bit to who took our survey, right? And that they either agreed or strongly agreed that employment reduces housing security. That's something that we know through research. But that less than half of employers said they were familiar with the needs of their precariously housed employees. So that was the basis upon which we built this work. So we did this survey to kind of understand, where are we at now, right? What do people think about, what do employers think about housing precarity or about housing precarious employees? And so we moved on then to our next slide, which is we built basically from that survey, we built on a couple of design thinking sessions, right? And so one of the core ways that we work at the Price Center is really high level engagement with partners and employers. And that's what I'm going to focus on in the second part of the presentation. But I wanted to give you some of the key findings from that work. So we worked with, we listened to employers and we asked them based on the survey, that helped us build our questions. We found that a significant portion of employees don't feel confident in their understanding of the barriers and needs that precariously housed job seekers face. So we thought that one way that folks could learn more is to partner with, organizations and resource centers that specialize in serving precariously housed populations. We also found that the COVID-19 pandemic gave rise to really a lot of challenges in terms of hiring and retaining talent. And this was a theme that's come up in many of our, in a lot of our work. But we thought that employers could adapt by approaching employment with empathy and a culture of flexibility. And that was a theme that came out through our design thinking sessions. And then finally, and I think this is the most tangible, is that technology really gives employers the opportunity to help their employees who are precariously housed or experiencing challenges. So one of the employers that we worked with is a national employee. It's a brand name, everyone's heard of them. And they have an app that employees can log into and say, I'm in a crisis, or I am in danger of losing my housing, or I'm having a mental health issue. And that app connects them with someone in their company that can help them with that problem. And so, there are some solutions out there. They're not necessarily focused on housing, but they're focused on helping. And so we found that technology, especially in this pandemic time, was a way to really a way that we could leverage technology to help employees. And so we wanted to ask you about benefits. We wanted to hear from you about what you think employers should be providing or do provide. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz to talk to lead us through a Jamboard activity. So there's the question, and I'll be quiet now. Go ahead, Liz.
Thank you, Caroline. So we're actually going to exit this. We're going to use the same Jamboard that we were using before, but now moving on to this first question. So we want you to think about employers that you are familiar with, perhaps where you work, and just put in the sticky some examples of benefits that employers provide today. I see mentoring, health insurance, flexibility, mental health services, PTO and vacation time, discounts. Yeah, these are great. Flexible scheduling, work from home options, connections to community resources. I'd love to hear from someone maybe who's filled one out or who didn't get a chance to.
Hi, everyone. This is Lisa Martinez with Tulare County. Workforce Investment Board. And this presentation, actually, I'm really excited for the rest of it. It really aligns with our project, which is Bridges to Employment and Careers. And it is a partnership with local CBO agencies and the city of Porterville to serve individuals experiencing homelessness. And so some of the benefits that our partner employer, which is the city of Porterville, provides not only the mentorship, but they work with us to, we provide paid transitional jobs for our job seekers. And so the city of Porterville provides that training, that mentoring, but they also provide a partnership with co-case management. So they work well with our workforce team and our local CBO agencies that also serve this population and have that expertise and understand those barriers and other resources. So as a team, we're all co-case managing and supporting these individuals.
Thanks so much for sharing, Lisa. Our second phase of this activity is, thank you, yes, a big reveal. What is missing from this list? So we actually do need you to now look at the blue stickies that you and your peers have put up and identify what holes do you see. And you can put those on the pink stickies, and you can also come off mute and introduce yourself and share. One example that comes to mind for me is childcare. I don't see this as a blue sticky, and I would love to live in a world where that is an employer benefit for people who need it. I see regular pay raises, livable wage depending on the area that you live in, access to meals or meal stipends, health and mental health access benefits, access to store belongings while working. That's great. Free classes to increase skills. Maternity and paternity leave. Yes, that's a great one. Student loan assistance, stopgap support during a crisis, food, housing, emergency funds. Yes, thank you. So this wasn't meant to be a leading question, but we were interested in seeing whether housing showed up as a benefit that people think of as coming from employers, or whether that is something that's missing. Our findings were that it tends to be missing. And so it's nice to know that, well, I guess it's not nice, but we maybe align on this assumption or finding. Housing support, yes, thank you. Retirement benefits, great.
Great.
All right.
Thank you, Liz. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for providing those thoughts in the Jamboard. We really appreciate it, and it does make this more fun and more interactive, but it's also very helpful to us. So when I come into work every day at USC, there's a Starbucks right on the corner here, and they have this beautiful sandwich board out front with this drawings on it that show all of the benefits that you can get for being a Starbucks employee, right? So there's 401k, there's all sorts of tuition, they pay for classes, promotion benefits, paid time off, and never ever is there anything written about housing. And so this is the biggest in Los Angeles, at least. I mean, I'd be interested to know from other parts of the state of California. In Los Angeles, housing is the biggest issue. It is the biggest expense. We have, so many people experiencing homelessness. So this is the number one thing on most people's minds. And yet, time and time again, it is left off of the list of benefits. It's left off of the list of what employers see as a way to retain talent and to attract talent, and so we've all read the stories, right? People driving so many hours to get to work because they're living in areas that they cannot afford. So it's something that we are really interested in and thinking about working with employers to help provide solutions. We found that employers and supervisors often prefer a don't ask approach, right? So maybe they suspect that someone is undergoing housing precarity, but it's easier just to not ask about it, right? And in some cases, if you're in a hiring situation, you're prohibited from talking about people's housing situations. But we want to encourage employers and employees to think about ways to lift up these issues and help, because then we can help kind of co-create a solution. So that was the first part of our presentation, which was around the findings of this work. And I would love it if you read the report, or there's briefs too, if you're not interested in the longer report. But now I want to turn to best practices. So how do we get all this work done? You know, how do we get people to answer our surveys, to come to our focus groups? Because that's kind of the way that we do work here at the Price Center. And the number one way is that at the Price Center for Social Innovation, one of our core values is that we rely on the expertise of our partners. So we cannot do this work from here by ourselves at USC, looking out onto the community and understanding community challenges. It would be impossible. It would also fall flat, right? And so we rely on the expertise of our partners, just like we crowdsource the answers on that Jamboard. That is how we understand the way people understand the problems and issues that their communities are facing. So that is a core value at the Price Center. Next slide. So this employer survey, it made, we got 1,000 responses. That was a big deal. People were really excited about it. They were trying to figure out how the heck do we get so many people to take our survey, right? In the midst of a pandemic, we yielded 1,037 respondents from our networks. It was an online questionnaire, and we were shocked by the number of folks who took that survey. And so one of the ways, and you can read a little bit about the employers who took the survey, the size of the size of the companies, and then the industries from which those companies were. And so the way that we did that is through our core sort of our core best practices around engagement, right? And that is through, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our approach to building partnerships, which is on the next slide, right? So if USC Price Center for Social Innovation would have sent that survey out by ourselves, we would have done a pretty good job of getting responses, right? We would have gotten, I don't know how many, but maybe a quarter. But by working with our partners at LeadersUp, who have the employers as their as their network, we leveraged that network to get those responses. We used social media, we used newsletters, we used LinkedIn, and we really relied on our partners to help spread the word. And so again, partnerships are like the way that we work at USC, and we cultivate authentic engagement with them. So we won't just come to you once and say, would you like to work with us on a project, and then work together and then never talk to you again. The people who are with us have been with us for many years, and we sort of create real relationships. So, JR, who I talked about earlier from LeadersUp, is not, a member of our team at the Price Center, but he is, he's someone we talk to at least once a week, right? Like he's definitely like a part of the work that we do. So we return to partners often. We don't just, we're not like a one and done type of organization. And then I think the other thing that we do that is a best practice is that we really try to avoid being extractive, right? So if we're going to ask you a question, if you're going to take a survey, if you're going to come to a design thinking session of ours, we're going to provide you back the data that you gave us. So we're going to make what you told us into something that we hope you will be useful to you and yours, whether it's through social media, whether it's through your the work that you do. So we try to find things that we try to give you back the work that you give us. And so that's really critical, I think, when you're asking people to spend time with you and to spend time answering your questions. We really want to show people that we value what you're giving us, but also give it back to you in a way that we hope is useful for your work. So time and time again, over the past 5 years that we've been in these roles at the Price Center for Social Innovation, we have worked with community to understand a problem or an issue area. And then once we've got that information from them, we've sent it back to them and said, this is what we heard from you. Does this resonate with your expertise? Is this helpful to you? And so I think that is really the key to our success. So we wanted to get, so I want to thank the partners, of course, our WAF partners on this work. On 8.0 is LeadersUp, Los Angeles Business Council, the County of Los Angeles, and the Workforce Development Board. Chrysalis is a partner that we are working with also on 9.0. And all of these folks, once, now they're with us, we'll never let them go. I really like that about the WAF model, that they require a team, right? So you have to have an influencer, a customer, an expert. And I think that model is really useful for getting a full picture and for making this work successful and scalable and systemic. So it doesn't just tackle one tiny piece of a problem. So we always want to thank our partners for that. And now I want to turn it over to you. And so Priya is going to lead you through an exercise where we talk about what authentic engagement means to you.
Thanks, Caroline. So we're going to head back to the Jamboard that we were working in before. There we go. So yeah, now we want to hear from you about partnerships and engagement with those partners. What does an authentic engagement with a partner or another person or organization that you're working with, what does that look like to you? How does it show up in your workplace? There we go. Real and honest discussion of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's a really good one. Value alignment, checking in, mentorship and feedback, review what is working well, and sharing outcomes. That's a good one. Goes back to what Caroline was saying about sharing the products of your work together. Inclusive and diverse stakeholder participation. Mutually beneficial. That's a good one. Goes back to not being extractive, as Caroline was saying. Getting to know partners as whole people. That is really important, especially for deep engagement. Formal in writing. Takes time and trust building. There you go. Being clear about our goals for working together and committed to working through details to meet those goals. And transparency from leadership. Building a connection and getting to know each other really well. On a personal level, that's really important. All right, well, if anybody has anything else that they wanted to add, feel free to put it in the chat at any point. And again, as Shauna was saying, you will have access to this, so you can fill it in after the fact as well. So Caroline discussed the practices that the Price Center at USC has for not only building the partnerships, but strengthening them and making sure that they're available for all the work that we have, no matter what project is coming up. So now we want to hear, what is it like in your workplace? What best practices does your workplace have for building those partnerships? And this was, something that I saw in the beginning, folks wanted to learn about. So it's a good opportunity to share an anecdote or a story about a time when, you built a partnership using one of these processes or practices. Transparency, it's a good one. It's a communication. Does anybody have a particular kind of cadence of communication? Does this look like a weekly meeting or a standing Zoom meeting? I'm sure there's lots of ways that different organizations handle communicating with partners. Texting, there you go. That's really great. Hitting all the touch points. Repeated visits and regularly communicating with employers, whether they need something at the time or not. I love that. Talk about not being extractive.
I see a hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Trinisha Session. Here on behalf of Rancho Dominguez AJCC. And I know that we built a partnership with OFY, which is Opportunities for Youth. It's a charter school. And one of the things that we do is we meet weekly, and then we also have a live spreadsheet where we communicate, and they're able to see everything that we put in as we do it. And then we're able to answer any questions and communicate immediately if there's anything that has any urgency within the spreadsheet.
Wow, thanks for sharing. That sounds like a really great resource, because not only are you communicating, but you're also sharing your program data where applicable. Thank you. Oh, Tanisha, I think we have a question in the chat for you. How do you handle confidentiality with that setup that you described?
Yeah, so the spreadsheet is only shared with, those of us who are like the CPAs and the case managers, as well as our programs director. So it's only shared with a few people, and you have to have login access. So your email has to be made accessible through the spreadsheet for you to be able to see any of the data and information being shared. And then we don't share any personal information. Just information regarding the participants and the students. So they come to our center to enroll, and we update through the live spreadsheet where the participants are in their enrollment process so that we can start them on their internship.
Nice, thank you. Frequent meetings and follow-up, thank you. Share, likability helps. That's so true. Sharing your whole self if you're going to expect their whole self, definitely. Person who said establish MOUs. Do you mind sharing, for those who aren't familiar, what MOUs are?
Hi, this is Lisa Martinez with Tulare. I'm the one that put that, not specific necessarily to this project, which it could lead to that. MOU is a memorandum of understanding. So it's an agreement between the partners. An example of that is our partnership with Tulare County Probation. We actually received a WAF grant many years ago that launched our partnership with Tulare County Probation. And after that grant ended, we've been able to sustain that partnership. And then we've now had established MOU that we renew each year. So it's in writing what our commitments are, and we continue to work together.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. Well, again, you can keep adding to this or put your best practices in the chat, but I will hand it over to, if anyone has any questions about the WAF 8.0 project that we had at the center. Caroline, I think, is your person. So feel free to unmute and ask, or you can feel free to put it in the chat as well.
Thank you, Priya. That was awesome. Thanks everybody for your engagement. Well, Amanda had a question for us for the WAF 8.0 team to talk a little bit about one of the findings of the WAF 8.0 work, which is the employment pipeline for the precariously housed. So I don't have a slide for this, but of course you have the report, so you can look at that. But I also didn't practice, so this part of my presentation isn't going to be as good as the first part. So when we talk about the employment pipeline for the precariously housed, what that is that we basically, from the survey, from the innovation labs, from follow-up interviews with participants, and from our own literature research, literature review, we basically built out a what we coined the employment pipeline, which refers to the stages of hiring, retention, and long-term economic stability for job seekers. And it requires that housing and systems coordination, basically it requires a look at the systems that are causing these problems. So it's not just about, an employee and employee, you're sort of working it out. It's also looking at the systems change that needs to occur for housing precarity to be resolved. And so, we built this pipeline, which requires housing and systems coordination. So that's the first step, which means, there needs to be investment in housing stock. There needs to be more affordable housing, right? That is the number one issue in Los Angeles. I don't know if that's the same for other places, but certainly Los Angeles needs more affordable housing that's closer to where people work. The second is, to think about supporting systems coordination to help, sort of deal with the structural issues that are affecting individuals, right? So it's not just about, it's not just about one person who needs a place, right? It's about understanding the issues at large in terms of why we have a lack of affordable housing and why we have so many folks who are falling into homelessness. The second part of our pipeline is transitional jobs. So this is really providing a variety of resources and job readiness to people who could use the support, right? So it's once you start investing in housing, then you also need to invest in folks and systems to create more folks who are job ready. And then the last is to really build out practices for long-term employment stability, right? So this is where we talked a little bit about what can employers do to help the folks who are already working there stay in their jobs. And in order to kind of shed light on this pipeline, we did 3 case studies. And so we interviewed 3 different organizations with whom we have relationships to talk about, to get more detail on these different examples, right? So we talked to Enterprise Community Partners to talk about housing and systems coordination in Los Angeles. That organization tries to both invest in housing stock and systems coordination to ensure that precariously housed individuals are not only sheltered, but also considered within the larger sort of set of issues in Los Angeles. We've also talked to Downtown Women's Center, who's a partner of ours, who really builds transitional employment for women who are experiencing homelessness. So they have both a shelter and then also a bunch of vocational programs to help women who are experiencing homelessness or are formerly homeless find work and stay in their jobs. It's like a really beautiful organization if you have a chance to look into the Downtown Women's Center. And then finally, for long-term employment stability, we interviewed FedEx. FedEx has been a partner of LeadersUp for a long time and have been with us since our first WAF in 7.0. And they're the ones who have that app. They really do a good job, I think, of trying to react to employers and employees and their needs. So FedEx is, they really try to have close communication. They try to give hear from employees and listen to them on their pain points. So that was how we talked about, that was one of the findings of our work, was this sort of pipeline. And those are some examples of the steps in the pipeline. Is that helpful? Okay. Thank you so much. So does anybody, we have like 5 minutes left before we turn it back. But does anybody have any questions for Liz, Priya, or myself?
Hi, Caroline. Thank you. This is great information. With your findings and the businesses that you work with and employers, did you find that there's an increased partnership with workforce and agencies that provide housing?
No, we didn't find that. In Los Angeles, it does not seem to be the case. So either the employer creates it themselves, or it doesn't happen. So I'll give you an example. Back when we did the LABC report, there was an incentive for tech companies when they came to LA to build housing. So that was an example of government and partnership with an employer, and it never went through. Like they couldn't make it happen in Los Angeles. That was one example. I'm trying to think off the top of my head of another. But in that report, that was many years ago, that report, we did not find, it was usually like from the company's perspective, like could a company pay to relocate people, or could they pay to build housing, would be like an amazing thing. But many of them, unless it was like a really wealthy company, did not do that. So I think a good policy recommendation would be increase those programs from the city and county or state. And
I just seen in the comment, that's the next thing I was going to bring up, because in our area, our partner agencies are able to provide Section 8 or vouchers, but there's limited housing and places for them to stay, which aligns with what the comment, limited short-term rentals as well. So someone put.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a good point. Thank you. Anybody else? Does anybody else know about a program that an employer uses to help incentivize housing or incentivize folks to, like, does anybody know about a program that helps people get housing? All the folks that you've worked with?
Not employers, but we are now connected as workforce with the Kings Tulare Homeless Alliance in our area, Tulare County Homeless Task Force, And our partner with our project, the city of Porterville, is also part of that. So they are not only, government agency, but they're also an employer that is training individuals that are experiencing homelessness. And then they also partner with our local task force and agencies that are providing housing solutions together.
Yeah, that's right. We do work with Chrysalis, and they do that sort of work here in Los Angeles. From that, but that's from they're like a social enterprise. So there are social enterprises in Los Angeles who do help that. And I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying I don't know them at the top of my head. There was LAUSD did build some housing for teachers here in Los Angeles, but teachers were priced out. So that housing came with a restriction on salary, and teachers made too much money for that housing. So there's these little policy nuances that come out, when you start to study these programs. USC has a program that if you buy a house in the area, they will help you with your mortgage. But most of the people in Los Angeles are renters. So that helps very few people here in Los Angeles County. But it is an example of an employer-led solution around housing. Well, I hope you got something out of this presentation. If you were shy and had a question you didn't want to ask it in front of anybody, please feel free to reach out to me, Liz and Priya, and I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to share our work.